Failure is a very real possibility, and individual failures can have far-reaching effects when you're at the top of an organisation. How do you deal with failure?
We all make mistakes. We're all human. There's always going to be human error within, wherever you are in an organisation, whether you're a CEO or you're delivering services. And I think we need to accept that that's going to happen. And I think you're absolutely right. It's how you deal with that failure. So for me, failure is always about a learning process. And I think putting the positive spin on it, you mop up your failure. You do what you need to do to make everything right when there's been an incident, for instance, or a failure of a process or a system. So do the immediate, but then actually look back at that and don't just sweep it under the carpet. Gather the team around you, whoever's been involved and who may be impacted by that failure. Gather them round, have the conversation. It's not about pointing the finger. It's not about blaming anybody in particular. In fact, I always like to go back to process and systems so we can dehumanise it so it's nobody's fault. And sometimes it is, but most of the time it's actually not. It's a system or the process that's failed, and often it's a lack of documentation to back up whatever process you've been trying to follow. So for me, it is a failure is a good learning. I've failed many times, and in my CEO role, I think we do make mistakes, and we've got to look at it in that way. And I don't mean a full-blown root cause analysis of anything that is a bit scary, but I do think it's worthwhile, and it's also a really good coaching and mentoring tool for more junior staff to actually come up through and learn from that role model.
Leadership is about courage, and it's also about the courage to fail. I think we're in the public domain, and failure is an inevitable part of it. I've heard other people talk about he was a fantastic person. He would have one great idea and 9 dreadful ones, but that one great idea was amazing. We have to celebrate success, and we have to realise that in failure there is learning. We're in a pretty zero tolerance society at the moment, and I think that's a very bad thing because it's stopping us celebrating failure. What I talk about leadership is about being able to make mistakes publicly. So when my staff see that I make a mistake, it's part of me. It's everyday living. So get over it. I'm a human being. I'm going to get it wrong. I'm not a god, and part of being a leader is in fact that my failures are going to be public. And they're going to be out there. So I've got to have the courage to do that.
It's a really interesting one because I really don't like to fail. It's probably inevitable that you will from time to time. It's something that I think you need to own and not be tempted to play the blame game and find who made that mistake or who put me on the wrong path. I think really it's about, as a CEO, saying, it's my job to take that on board and reflect on how I might have contributed or how I could have done it differently. So taking the time to do that reflection and then make sure that you put it behind you. And this is something where I talk with even my EA regularly because she's so conscious of getting things right. And this is about us as a team making good decisions. And when we fail, support each other so that it doesn't happen again. And you learn things. If you reflect on it enough, you learn how to do things better next time. And you learn not to be so devastated when you fail as well. So I think that's really important to just get on with it.
Firstly, the greatest issue there is you feel like you have let people down. And personally, you can beat yourself up because you are the leader. Leaders take failure with a great deal of pain, and we feel bad about that. And as a leader, failure can often be seen as a learning process, but we tend to move on to the next good thing to do rather than reflect on what actually happened. I don't think not-for-profits and commercial businesses are good at reflecting on what went wrong and why, because it may be a bit too close, and it becomes an emotional problem then. Maybe it needs a third party to come in and say, well, we weren't successful, and to facilitate a session for us to be able to say, what can we learn by it? But it takes a high confident CEO to be able to take charge of that kind of thing to do.
What I've then got to have the courage to do is say, well, what went wrong? what did I learn from it? And in fact, one of the interview questions that I will always ask any senior manager or anyone who's going for a job is, talk to me about your biggest mistake in the last job. Don't dwell on the mistake, but tell me what you learned from it. And it's a fantastic question, because I get people saying, oh, I learnt not to trust people. Okay. What I'm looking for is that ability to learn and to learn something constructive. And then I'll often say, and when did you then use that learning again? And that you really then know this is a person who's going to be a great leader, because they're going to keep moving forward.